So now we're moving on to the financial aspects of career planning. In the first chapter, we looked at the overall part of personal finance, personal money management, um, and now we're kind of digging down into some of the details so far as your career planning is concerned. Uh, Anyhow, so the first objective we're looking at is to describe activities associated with career planning and advancement. One of the things, just as to kind of get started here, one of the things to note is that what I found, and it seems to be true, is that the only thing worse than having uh, too many choices in life in terms of career paths and so on and so forth is not having any. So this is it's a tough choice. These are tough choices to make, tough things to consider, especially when you're kind of beginning, or even if you're somewhere along the path, you're not content with your the career that you have, so on and so forth. Um, you have to think about these things, and you've got to develop some sort of a career path or career planning, and so on and so forth. So, second, evaluate the factors that influence those employment opportunities. Do you have the proper skill set? Do you have the proper mindset, if you will, to do these? Because there are oftentimes we find that you're able to do something, but just because you are able to do something doesn't necessarily mean that is where your spirit is, so to speak, what you really want to be doing. And frankly, what you do find is that you don't, rather, not that you find, but what is kind of unearthed as you move through various career paths is that you find there are some things you like, some things you don't like, and you have to make those decisions as to whether or not you want to, change that career path. But you really don't know until you jump in. That's typically the case with life in general, and certainly in the job market. So anyway, implement employment search strategies. Come up with a plan is basically what it is, and follow through on that plan. Follow through on things that do have an interest for you. Assess the financial and legal concerns related to obtaining the employment, meaning, of course, that is it worth your time and effort to do that? Do you have the time to go out and pursue a bachelor's degree, or do you have the financial resources, of course? And how do you go about doing this? How do you go about making this fit into your schedule, if you will? Lastly, analyze the techniques available for career growth and advancement. Again, this is fine-tuning things, looking into the actual how you go about doing this. Are you going to go to school full time? Are you going to go to school part time? Are you going to back to selecting the career path that you're on, how it is that you're going to advance going forward. So objective one, describe activities associated with career planning and advancement. Definition time, right? Job is an employment position obtained mainly to earn money. Most people change jobs several times during a lifetime, and that's either by their own choice or by other people's choices. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that you're fired or you're let go. That, of course, can happen, but oftentimes it can be mutual. Meaning that you're not quite the right fit for the job at that point in time, and you and your employer either agree upon that, or you've reached that decision on your own, or your employer reaches the decision. There are many different ways of looking at this. You're laid off. Were you laid off, or were you sacked? Were you fired? Or did you opt to leave of your own accord? So on and so forth. And then that's leaving jobs. But again, the point is that a job is something that you take in order to earn money, in order for you to do other things. And I say that as opposed to a career, which we'll get to that in a moment. But just to put it into the proper context again, sometimes a job again, is something, some days are good, some days are bad. That's kind of drilling down at it at its on a day-to-day type basis. All right, versus the career. Career is a commitment to profession that requires continued training. And frankly, this is with any job as well these days, is that there's always going to be continued training, continued education, where you have whatever that job is, you end up going to and being involved in workshops, and you're continuously training, retraining, going through various exercises to refresh your skill set, so on and so forth. So again, career selection and professional growth require that planning. So it's not just a matter of saying, well, I'm going to get a degree and I'm going to be an engineer. Are you going to, if once you're an engineer, you will be going to school for a fairly large, I'm not going to say a huge portion typically of your career as an engineer, but you will be going to school quite often. And if you talk to an engineer, for example, when they're a freshly minted engineer coming out of school versus an engineer that's been in the field for 10, 15, 20, 30 years in their career, and ask them if things have changed. That's an easy answer, but this is hopefully that kind of gives you the idea. Things are constantly in a state of flux. They're constantly in a state of change. Trade-offs and career decisions, career choice and professional development alternatives have risks and opportunity. Again, it's very important to keep in mind. Is it worth the trouble of pursuing this career? Is it worth the trouble of investing your time? All right. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you are studying and when you are practicing, we'll put it on. We'll just say this is on the athletic field. Okay, whatever that is, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, softball, track, so on and so forth. Training. So you train. You train for events. You train for specific athletic endeavors, volleyball, so on. I could just keep rattling things off, but you get the idea. You train for this. You train to become a hockey player. You develop your skill set so far as skating and so on and so forth is concerned. You become a golfer. You develop a certain skill set. One of the things that they all have in common is that they require what? Discipline. So it takes discipline in order to hone those skills to become a better, baseball, softball player. It takes a much practice. This is an investment. And who are you investing in, or what are you investing in? You're investing in yourself. There's an expression in economics, the various productive resources are labor, entrepreneurship, capital, and land. So when you're developing your physical skill set, honing your physical skills, that's developing that labor. And it has benefits. It has benefits that go well beyond even if you just play softball. Those benefits go well beyond the softball diamond because you stretch, you do all these exercises that are involved with that, you develop a sense of focus. Absolutely, you have to be focused when you're participating in a sport. So these are things just to put things into perspective. The career choices in professional development alternatives have risks and opportunity costs. The opportunity cost that I just described was the effort that you took in developing that discipline. It's something that will pay off later on, but in order to do that, you had to surrender something else. That's the opportunity cost. Remember, for you to participate in a sport, whether or not you lettered in high school or whatever that you're involved with, you have to surrender what? Time is always a component, and that's definitely a major portion of opportunity cost. I'm going on about this, but it's important to get that wrapped around your head. Career choices require periodic evaluation of trade-offs related to personal, social, and economic factors. And what this means is that embedded in those decisions that we make, when we're considering opportunity costs, surrendering the time in order to dedicate to whatever that sport is or whatever that discipline is. We'll just specifically look at time. Forget about money for the moment. So you're going to be dedicating 2 hours per day. So that's we'll just say 5 days a week. So we're looking at 10 hours a day that you're dedicating that you can't use somewhere else. And oh, by the way, when you're done with that 1 week, those 10 hours are gone. This is where we start talking about, again, I'll reread this, is that career choices require periodic evaluation of trade-offs related to personal, social, and economic factors. This speaks to what is, and again, in economics is referred to as sunk cost. You can't retrieve it. So once you spend on something, whether you're investing in yourself and developing your human capital or not, that decision to spend those 10 hours in training for a week, you can't take that back. That's why you have to continually look at this as, yourself as being, limited. We're limited. This is back to the basis of economics, the study of scarcity. We're limited on those things that we can do. And those limitations kind of drive our decisions. And this is what we're doing when we're continuously reevaluating these things. Okay. So anyway, moving on from that, the skills gap, the difference between skills needed by employers and skills possessed by applications is an ongoing concern. This is something that all of us have to consider. Meaning, are we technologically adapt? I mean, I shouldn't even get into this, but I'm sure that you are far more technologically savvy than your parents were. Your parents are, I should say. And you look at that and you say, wow, the truth of the matter is that you are that far ahead so far as that, just being comfortable with technology, for example. I'm sure that many of you have either parents, grandparents, or people that you know of that are not all that technologically savvy, or they're not that comfortable with technology. And it's definitely something that is something that is very important for going forward, kind of a starting point, a basis for starting. Anyhow, there are many career opportunities out there, coders, web developers, so on and so forth, cybersecurity, of course. Many options that are out there for people that by developing their skills, continuing on from this being technologically savvy, so to speak, to transferring those into more marketable skills. Meaning, again, back to you develop the discipline. So now let's put that to work somehow, some way. Employability skills are also missing in many potential employees. So these skills that we're talking about, I've always said this, is that sometimes, and you'll realize this as you go through life, you'll look back and your first jobs are very, very critical that you have, the early jobs that you have, because the most important thing you could take from a job, jobs when you're young in particular, and not just when you're young, but certainly something that comes to mind is that learning the discipline that's required to getting a job. It's hard. Keeping that job is very difficult, and actually thriving in that job and making that job your own, meaning that you become adept at the job, however long that takes. And the component of that's always, I don't want to say it's overlooked, but the thing that's the most important, as I see it, is the discipline that's required to show up to your job on time. Simple as that. If you don't show up, then you can't you can't acquire the skill set. You can't maintain the discipline. In fact, it's a sign of a lack of discipline. And I'm not being harsh about it, but I'm stating a point that's very, very simple and very, very important, and that is that you develop that skill set. Part of that skill set is developing the discipline to actually show up to work on time. Simple as that. So career training and skill development, level of formal training affects financial success, always. Um, there's that formal piece of it. It's not just the part that's embedded, as we talked about before, developing the discipline and so on and so forth. And now this is the point where we start to drill down into the specific areas which you want to focus your energies on. Training may be viewed in two main categories. One is technical, two are general skills. Technical refers to the specialized career training for a specified specific profession. And what that means is that you walk into a job and the first thing that you do when you walk into a new job is admit that you don't know much, or the first thing that you find is that you really don't know much. You feel like a fish out of water. You feel somewhat like you're flailing. It doesn't matter what the job is. You have to start with that idea of being open and so on and so forth. But the thing that kind of carries you through, once you get past that hump, the initial hump, is are your two skill sets that we're talking about here, your general skills. That's the one that kind of gets you through on gets you to work and gets you moving along in the workplace in general, versus the technical piece of it, where you actually, before you go into the job, you actually know something about the job. You actually understand kind of what's expected of you. Maybe not specifically, but you understand what the job entails walking in the door. It's very important. Anyways, so the technical skill set is something that we focus on, the very specific, versus the general skill set. Those are that speaks to the skill set that we're talking about prior to, where you walk in the door and you can write a memo. You can conduct yourself in a professional manner. You have the discipline to show up and to pay attention and to learn your job, to do those technical things, to employ those technical skills that you know you have. And they label it here as traits adaptable to most work situations, called social intelligence, knowing when to pipe down, when to speak up, and the way you learn those, especially in an early job, is you try it and you find out rather quickly which way you're moving through the job. It's not dissimilar to the classroom, frankly, in some ways. Some can be acquired at school, while others require experience. And this is again where they kind of go hand in hand: the school experience with this and the workplace. So this is the connection. There's something with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's part of the Department of Labor, where they look at what are called lifetime earnings, so to speak, where they put together on average. So they're looking at averages, wages and income and so on and so forth. So they piece together, various data that they have, and they put together how much a person is going to be working, not how much they're working, how much they're going to be earning for a given job. And so these are just general median weekly earnings, for example, here for various levels of education. The word escapes me, but you get the idea, is that we're looking at how much a person works, earns on average. So with a 2-year degree, it's $830 per week. And by the way, median means the midpoint. Midpoint meaning, again, the one right in the middle versus the average. Average is the overall. Take the overall, divide by the number that we're looking at, and we arrive at the average. The median is that midpoint. So the average can be above or below that midpoint, or vice versa. The midpoint can be above or below that average, that mean. At any rate, a 2-year degree is $830 per week. And something to keep in mind is that when we're looking at a typical budget, an annual budget, you're working on average, and this is straight budget talk, is that you're looking at 2,000 hours per year, meaning that you're working for 50 weeks a year, 50 weeks a year, and you're working 40 hours per week. So we're taking 2 weeks off for various things, and 2 weeks off for vacations and weekends and so on and so forth. But I shouldn't say that, but the weekends. But the idea is that it's about 50 hours per week you work, and 40 hours per week that you work, and 50 weeks out of the year rather than the 52. And this is where we arrive at this 830 number for the 2-year degree, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, 1170, master's, 1400, professional or doctorate degree, 1790. And what you'll notice, it's a takeaway from this, is that yes, there's the more education that you have, the more income that you'll earn. But these all involve what? Opportunity cost and trade-offs. So, for example, is there an opportunity cost in first acquiring a 2-year degree, high school diploma for that matter? Is there an opportunity cost associated with acquiring a 2-year degree? Yes, that a 2-year degree typically entails about 60 credit hours. 60 credit hours worth of work. That equates to, we'll just say, 3 credit hours per class. So we're looking at 20 classes that you would have to take in order to earn your 2-year degree, give or take. Probably more, frankly, but we'll just say that there are 20 classes that you have to take, and those 20 classes require what? Time and money. So it's expensive. This is an expensive proposition for you to go out there and to earn, in order to earn that 2-year, that associate's degree. And taking it another step further, so you have your associate's degree, so you've completed your junior college or community college the first 2 years, your freshman and sophomore year, and you go on to complete your bachelor's degree, which is another 60 plus credit hours, or another 20 plus courses that you would have to take to complete that to acquire your bachelor's degree. And so there's more opportunity cost and trade-offs that flow forth from this. So this investment in your time can become very expensive, and this is where the opportunity cost comes into play. This is why, in general, why you have a group of people that have the associate's degree, the next group of people that have a bachelor's degree, and the higher you go in terms of academic achievement, I should say, in terms of earning degrees and so on and so forth, the smaller. So think about it as a pyramid. So lots more people have associates, and fewer people have bachelor's degrees, and fewer people have master's degrees, and fewer people attain the status of like an MD, doctor, or a PhD, etc. Anyway, you get the idea that the further you go along this track, the more expensive it becomes in terms of opportunity cost, but also it becomes more financially rewarding, if you will. Anyway. So the personal factors, satisfying career may be identified using guidance tests that measure abilities, interest, personality, personal qualities. There are numerous tests that you can take to kind of find out narrow down your interests so far as jobs are concerned. So it goes beyond just your ability to do a job. Not everybody has the ability to become a brain surgeon. We'll just say that. Not everybody has the ability, whether we're talking about because of their physical issues or don't have the actual aptitude for doing that. There's also the disposition, meaning are you the kind of person that can go through all the education that's involved, not just the rigor of the education, but also just are you interested in pushing yourself that far? This is where these aptitude tests comes in, these interest inventories, in looking at your personality, if you're suitable for this type of position. Not everybody is highly suited for structured environments. Some people can't stand that. Can't, the option, the possibility or the prospect of sitting in an office 8 hours a day at the same desk, perhaps, for example, 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week, that is something that they're not really interested in doing, or in high pressure situations, air traffic controller, or a police officer, etc. And as opposed to the unstructured or creative work environments. The reality here is that sooner or later, every job, every career, you run into days, for example, where the career is just that, a job. And these are things that we have to, there are some days that are better than others for any number of reasons, but this is something that all of us have to contend with. Some days are better than others. Some days are more demanding than others. Some jobs are not just some jobs, but some days are more demanding than others, regardless of the job or regardless of the career path. But these things help you to kind of provide you some guidelines. So back to the final is the personal SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis is basically looking at dragging down. We'll get into this more, but it's back to this career decision making that right here that we're focusing on. And so we're back to our circle again, because we continually have to address these little changes, whether they're little or large. This is the process by which we go through, and frankly, we go through processes like this on a how do I want to say it, on a in an ongoing manner, of course, but we do this just out of habit, and when we develop good habits. And this is what this is all about, is developing those good habits and trying to put a label on these things that we're doing as we're moving through this decision making, and this without driving ourselves crazy as we go through, but to kind of keep moving things along is really the objective. So one, assess, research personal goals, abilities, and career fields. So if we're thinking about making changes, which all of us are typically on a fairly regular basis, research the employment market and identify specific employment opportunities. We all run into situations where we say, oh, we see someone doing a job, we think, oh, I like that job. So there's nothing wrong with it. That's good. Where we have our interest piqued, where we want to find where we think that might be a job that would be suitable for us. And that's when we have to start doing our research, right? So change employment within the same career field. This is making more in terms of baby steps, right? So develop a resume, cover letter, apply for available positions within kind of your arms. This is the low-hanging fruit, the jobs that are out there that are kind of readily available for you. Interviewing for available positions, assess your interview performance. This is going out there and doing these things, doing these job interviews, and kind of oftentimes what happens, the interview process, I'll be totally blunt about this, is it can be very disheartening, because you think you walk in the door with a certain skill set, and then you find out that, well, I know it's there, but you go through an interview and you find out you have nothing but doubts about this. Or, you may actually have the opposite. You may say, oh, I was made for this. And that's what this process is about, is that to find out if the job is, potential job is actually suitable for you. And this is where that interview performance, that review part comes in, where you go through and you say, oh, well, yes, maybe I was thinking about becoming a long haul truck driver, but I'm not really sure if I could put up with the traffic in big cities, and driving long distances, and having the responsibility of everybody on the road around me, and so on and so forth. It's where you think about these things when you get a taste for what the job might is a very important word to might entail. Number 5, evaluate financial and other factors of the position you are offered. Does it make sense? Are you does it make sense to move from one job to another for a very small increase in salary, if that's important? And all these things are important, but if that's more important for you, or perhaps this money is not in question. You're getting a much higher salary, but you realize that you're going to be working many more hours, and it's going to be taking more of your time, and there's much more to learn. These are all good things, don't get me wrong. And what we encounter in all career paths as we move on, there's more the more demands that are being made of us, but are you willing to do that? Are you in a position to be able to do that? 6, plan and implement a program for career development. This is, again, employing that entire skill set from before, and not the skill set, but the steps before, where you think about a trajectory that is suitable for you. Because what will happen is that you find out that you keep your head down, learn your job, do this and do that, and you go on interviews and you find out that, oh, I've learned my job, and yes, I'm ready to move on to on to the next step. And this is where all those previous steps come into play to help you formulate the proper to provide you with the proper guidance, if you will, for going forward. Career opportunities now and in the future. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the reality is out there. Evaluate factors that influence employment opportunities. Career opportunities are based on social influences, demographic trends, geographic trends, economic conditions, interest rates, inflation, consumer demand, industry trends, foreign competition changes, changing use of technology. There's a whole jumble here. So what we're looking at here then is when we're trying to, you're trying to predict the future. Good luck. I'll say that first off. But there are some indicators out there that we know, some realities, if you will, that are going to be in place for your entire career. Whether it's your career ahead is going to, meaning your work life is going to include the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. There are some things that are not going to change. They're going to be, and what I mean by that is that while they're changing within, they're always going to be demographic trends, for example, or geographic trends. Meaning, what is the population that you're looking at? What is the makeup of your population? If you have a career choice where you're going to require to learn another language, for example, whether because you want to go overseas, or within the U.S. you want to learn Spanish, or pick a language. If you want to learn Chinese because Mandarin, for example, because you think that there's going to be increased relations with China, so far as trade, job opportunities are concerned, or simply as the baby boomers. The baby boomers this is when we talk about demographics, the aging population. So the baby boom includes folks that are 1946, born between 1946 and 1964. Now, as they move through, and many of those folks are in retirement. They could be your parents or grandparents, and they may be retiring or considering retirement. And what happens when they retire? Their jobs have to be filled by other people. This is opportunity, right? Or they may require services that people have to render, because somebody, when it comes right down to it, has to actually build the things or provide the services for whoever is out there in the population. So these are things, drilling down kind of deeply, but they're out there all the time. So this presents opportunities for us. Back to that SWOT, situational awareness. What is happening? What opportunities are out there that will present themselves to us. And so those are looking at it more in terms of people, economic conditions, looking at interest rates, inflation, consumer demand. And this is, again, kind of drilling down in a different manner, but when we talk about interest rates, what kind of an environment do we have? Do we have an environment where interest rates are going to be high, where there's to offset the prospect of inflation? We won't get into too much detail here, but there are a lot of economic factors that will be involved in job choices as we go forward as well. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that consumer demand. How are we going to position ourselves to deal with this consumer demand? This is the population at large, but probably more specifically for for yourself, is trying to address what the consumer's needs are going forward. Back to what I said before about describing the baby boomers. They're going to need more what? Medical services. They're going to need more at-home healthcare, for example. Uh, Uber drivers. You can go through the whole laundry list of things that are out there. This is the demand is out there for all of these jobs, these career prospects. These are things that we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we have a pretty good idea that maybe your job will come and go. Meaning that you may lose your job because there's not you guessed wrong or so on and so forth. But in general, we have a pretty good idea of where things are going forward. Lastly, when we're looking at the industry trends, the foreign competition, and this is the changing uses of technology. The foreign competition is an interesting one. This is where you start getting into economic policies, as in terms of international trade. How do we address these things? How do we as a nation address the whole prospect, if you will, of international trade? How do we address foreign competition individually as companies, of course, or individually as I should say, as not individually but as a nation, so on and so forth. But that's something that it's forever changing. And competition, the one thing that competition guarantees us is that we have to keep our skill set sharp, because we're not just competing with our neighbor, we're competing with our neighbors globally, if you will. Anyway, lastly, changing uses of technology. We've already talked about that quite a bit, and that's embracing the technological changes. It's not saying change for the sake of change, but the reason that we employ technology is to increase our efficiency. And efficiency means that we're going to be able to produce more for less, is really what it comes down to in an economic sense. That's what efficiency is. And the reason that we apply technology is to increase those efficiency. So we have to either get on board with that and try to get our head wrapped around that, or we get left behind oftentimes, right? We see that already. I'm sure you've seen that and you're well aware of it. So back to the social influences, demographic trends, single working parents, more food. So these are just examples, if you will. It's a reality of life. There are single parents, and we're in both there. You could be at both parents, but for the most part, most people are. We don't have as much as we've had in the past of the stay-at-home partner, if you will. We'll leave it at that, whether it's mom or dad or whomever. So that requires, of course, more food services and eating out and so on and so forth, and childcare, leisure time. Think about it this way: the word leisure is a very interesting one, because if you divide your day up into two categories, we'll make it extremely simple. You're either working, or you're not working. Not working would include sleep, so on and so forth. That's leisure time. So if you're working 8 hours a day, 16 hours of your day is focused on leisure time. And you take another 8 hours of that for sleeping, so you've got 8 hours left for these other endeavors: interest in health, fitness, technology, recreation. Vacations are, of course, leisure time. Sports are leisure time, even though it seems like it might be work, or school for that matter. No, I shouldn't say that. School is definitely not leisure time. or at least it oughtn't be. Longer lifespans. This has to deal with the baby boom that I mentioned. People living longer on average because due to pharmaceuticals, drugs, drug therapies, and people taking better care of themselves, for example. Um, we hear more and more frequently today about people living to age 100, longer lifespans. Um, and something else that's kind of hidden in this longer lifespans is that the longer you live, the longer when you're alive, the more income that you need going forward. This is kind of another way of looking at this. This is why, in many cases, you see people that are well into their 70s or maybe in their 80s that are actually still working. Because you have to support that. You have to be able to support that with yourself with some income going forward. And if you're fortunate enough to have set aside, which is part of the objective behind this course, where you're able to enjoy your retirement years rather than having to work every day. And this is very subjective. Some people just enjoy working. We all know people that are like that. Anyway, that's the longer lifespan. Many things that go along with that. Employment training, demand for teachers, corporate trainers, related careers. It's certainly going to, back to what I said before, the one thing I've known in my rather long career at this point is that I am constantly, I have been, and yeah, still, I guess, is that still involved with being involved in workshops and this constant ongoing education that, like it or not, it's the reality. And so there's a demand for people to be able to do this, for teachers like me, trainers and other workshop folks, etc. So the geographic trends, where jobs are, salary, living costs, is kind of drilling down into the what we had talked about before. And so if we're looking at different cities, there are different costs of living associated. This is very straightforward. But we'll just use this as an example. Index number times the salary divided by the index number equals the buying power. So for example, a person earning $30,000 in Nebraska would need to earn $39,550 in Chicago based on that index that we were talking about. The index is usually, we're at 100. So Chicago is a bit more expensive, so it's the index is higher, 123, versus Nebraska, which is actually below the 100 at 93.3. So what that means, and it's a long way around, but it's something that's very, very straightforward. It's simply more expensive to live in Chicago than it would be in some, like in Omaha, Nebraska, for example. All right, and so these are important things to keep in mind when you consider jobs. As simple, as straightforward as that. There may be fewer opportunities. There certainly are fewer opportunities for work, numbers of jobs, and because of the numbers of people in Nebraska versus in Chicago. However, that's a lot of that can be offset with access to the different job services that are out there, and being able to do your homework properly up front to be able to put, to keep this into account, to take this all into account. Anyway, very straightforward. Economic conditions, career opportunities affected by, back to what we are listed before, high interest rates, price increases or inflation, decreased global demand for goods and services, and that's oftentimes, that last piece is driven by the trade relations with other countries, meaning more specifically in economic finance parlance, the cost of the foreign exchange. So if the U.S. dollar goes up, for example, the cost of those goods that are produced in the U.S. become more expensive to foreign buyers, and they're less likely to purchase them. So there's a lot that goes into this, but you get the idea. Interest rates are always critical in terms of which way the economy is going. The higher the interest rates means that it's usually in response, if you will, to those price increases that are listed, labeled below. So the point is, kind of the takeaway from this is that we have to be nimble and we have to be aware of what is going on around us, because what is the one thing we know about economic conditions? They change constantly. Again, the last part here, for example, high interest rates reduce employment in housing related industries. This is, again, just an example, and the reason that is because interest rates go up, activity in the housing markets tend to go down, because higher interest rates mean higher mortgage interest rates, and the higher the mortgage interest rates, the less likely it is for people to purchase homes. Simple, straightforward as that. Much more to it, but that's just an example. Industry trends, service industries with greatest employment potential, and this is as of today, and it's not going to change going forward, but IT, information technology, that humongous umbrella that's out there, healthcare and medical technology. And I think I read recently that the highest employment, I shouldn't say the highest one, the most people are employed in some sort of healthcare medical technology. And I'm not sure what percentage that is, but it's huge. It's out there. And IT, for example, pretty much encompasses everything as well. Environmental services, trash hauling, and so on and so forth, business services. And we're not just talking about Kinko's and places like that, or I should say like Office Max. We're talking about business services that are typical things that you see, the sides of vehicles or servicing businesses and so on and so forth. Anyway, social services, marketing, sales, and retailing, hospitality, food services, management and human resources, education, and financial services. So these are all things that we know that they're going to be pretty, if not stable, they will be growing going forward. It's all pretty straightforward. These are things that, for example, why would education be an option or be a good possibility, a good prospect going forward? First, that was just walk through like a laundry list of things. The baby boomers. So again, 1946 to 1964, a lot of those are employed where? Teaching. And what's going to happen is they're going to retire. And when they retire, when they leave the workforce, those jobs have to be filled. And our population is actually expanding, and we can get into that at some point in time. We are growing at a reasonable rate. So what that means is that children have to be educated, adults have to be educated, obviously, for the reasons that we had talked about, in order to obtain and to maintain job skill sets, etc. So this is where we're talking about. It has to be covered. Financial services, people get older, and what are you doing in financial services? You're investing. That's really what that part, it's not just that, but that's a major portion of it. And people have to be able to figure out how it is that they're going to invest their savings, for example. We'll get into that much later. But anyways, you get the idea. These are all areas that are going to be in great demand moving forward, without a doubt. These are huge swaths of our economy, but they're all very important. Again, starting with IT. IT is going to be there no matter what going forward. Implement search strategies, implement employment search strategies, obtaining employment experience, part-time employment development. I can't emphasize this enough. The obtaining the employment experience, whether it's the simplest of jobs or it's a job in which you are, it takes a huge skill set. The point is that developing your skill set in the employment, in the realm of employment, is absolutely imperative. So whatever that is, whatever it takes, part-time employment, a relatively low-paying job, it doesn't matter, because you develop contacts. Volunteer work. You don't have, you want to go off into some other area and you're not sure if you like it or not, volunteer. Volunteer for a job at a CPA firm, for example. Just walk in and ask them is there something that you can do to help them out? And I shouldn't go that far because typically we're talking about volunteer internships. They kind of dovetail together, but you get the idea. You can volunteer with your um, with your city, with your church, so on and so forth. You can develop skills by volunteering. People are always willing to hire you if you're a volunteer because it does not cost them anything, right? Or they're at least they're typically open to that. Keep these things in mind. Keep your mind open about these prospects. Internships. These are specifically focused on back to what I said before about like a CPA firm, certified public accounting. You're thinking about accounting and you're not really sure what's all involved. So you might, if you're in school, you might want to seek an internship, and that helps you. It helps you to do at least two things. One is to get an idea what the heck it is to be an accountant. And two, if that is what you truly enjoy. Not that, again, these are things that are for you to gain experience and to gain some sort of, the expression is currency, meaning they gain some understanding of what this is about, both the social and the technical piece that we had talked about before. Campus projects, and this is being involved in student government and so on and so forth. You're obtaining career skills by, again, this is practice. It's not just practice. Everything in life is practice, but this is practice that's right in front of you, and you have ample access to administrative functionaries, if you will, at schools, and also the professionals, meaning the actual professors that would be available to you. It's at least it's not to some point. Anyway, you get the idea. Get experience is really what it comes down to. Career information sources. There are multitudes of them. Library media. This is on campus, for example. Media sources could be anything. Newspapers and magazine articles, television, radio, news reports, and these are things kind of old school in many ways. Online sources, this is where we all seem to go now as we look at things online. If we want to learn about career choices, podcasts are available. Google's out there for us to look, and they guide us to whatever resources they want to guide us to. But the point is that you can kind of pick and choose and go through and get a flavor for what it is that you're kind of wanting to delve into. Campus career office, this is the placement office, and so on and so forth. Business and personal contacts, these are friends, and also back to what we were talking about before. If you want to know what an accountant does, go to a CPA office and ask if you can just talk to somebody about the career prospects, about what it is, what's involved. These are readily available resources for all of us. Using career information sources, Occupational Outlook Handbook. This is the Occupational Outlook. This is something, again, typically what I'd look at is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you can Google this, or Bing it, or Yahoo, or what is the other one? There's another, there are several other browsers or search engines that you can use out there, but Occupational Outlook Handbook would typically be the one that I look at least is through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Career Development Office at your school, placement office, however you want to look at it, networking, or as my friend used to call it, not working. It's not the case, but networking is the process of making and using contacts to obtain and update career information. Main sources of networking include community organizations, professional associations, business contacts. And it's kind of in a formal context, but it's as simple as going to an office, something that interests you, and knocking on the door after I'll use the CPA firm again as an example. You're interested in becoming an accountant or a bookkeeper or whatever. Knock on the door and see if you can find somebody to talk to. It's as simple, straightforward as that. Typically, people will find time. Networking, again, effective networking means preparing and practicing a 30-second summary of abilities and experience, volunteering for committees, and these are just examples of things that you can do. Volunteering for committees, and if you have 30 seconds in front of somebody, you can kind of spill your guts in 30 seconds, in essence, about what you're interested in trying to find out. Volunteer for committees and events, professional organizations. There's that volunteering part is important. You have to be cautious not to get in over your head, but you try to volunteer in a manner in which that you'll be able to kind of direct things, if you will. Ask questions, asking questions to get others to talk about themselves and their experiences. This is that interviewing process, and back down on the bottom, informational interview is a meeting in which you gather information about a career or an organization. This can be as formal as you'd like it to be, or as informal as you'd like it to be. But it's something to get you talking to people, trying to find out what's going on. If you have an uncle that is, or an aunt that is an engineer, find out what's entailed with being an engineer. This is using the resources that you have at your disposal. Identifying job opportunities. There are numerous advertising job advertisements that are out there. I just keep thinking of Indeed, for example, or it used to be Monster. There were just numerous job search kind of aggregators that are out there that you plug in your information and they send you jobs that fit your criteria within the context of your resume. These are just collecting things up and pointing them in the direction in a general sense. And so there's lots and lots of these out there. Networking and career fairs are very important because this is when you can actually practice. You can talk to people, and back to that 30-second blurb about what your expectations are, your questions that you have in mind. Do a little bit of research, and it goes a very, very long way at these networking or career fairs. Employment agencies are, you hire somebody to actually find you that job, and that's their job, that's their role, and they're not cheap. There's like Robert Half, I think, that's the one that comes to mind. There are numerous others that are out there too. They just, for some reason, they escape me, but there are a number of job placement. The higher you get up in an organization, the more advanced your career is. You start getting headhunters, people that are actually looking for people to fill positions, and they recruit you, for example. But it's all the same thing, and that is you have people working in your behest, on your behalf, to find jobs. Okay, job creation involves developing an employment position that matches your skills with the needs of an organization. It's that skill matching piece of it. Whether you do this on your own or you hire somebody to go out there and do this for you, it's the same amount of work really on your own part, because you're the one that's involved, that's responsible for making sure that your skill set matches with the organization. It's not the other way around. The organization is looking for someone with a certain skill set, and it's incumbent upon you to have that skill set, keeping these things in mind. It's not to say you can't develop, but usually these things they come out in interviews as you go along. Other things, visit organizations where you'd like to work, online searches, be in contact with alumni in your field. Alumni organizations are very important for this. This is all about networking again. Applying for employment. There are numerous resume builders that are online. I noticed that Microsoft Word, for example, has a template out there for resumes, and very straightforward. And follow the guidelines. You can always hire somebody to do a resume. I have a sister-in-law that does. I'm not looking for business for her, but she does resumes. And she's been doing this for a number of years. She really, truly enjoys it. And she's helped a lot of people, put together resumes that paint a very good picture of what that person's skill sets are all about, and, et cetera. So it's important to have a good resume, because that's the first and oftentimes the last thing an employer sees, meaning you see a bunch of resumes, you go through it, and Does this person meet with our criteria? Nope. Okay, that's it. Adios. Or, okay, let's take this and go to the next step, interview process. In conjunction with the resumes, cover letters. They accompany a resume and they express that interest in a job, and it's something very specific for this. And again, in the appendix in the book, you can go through some examples, but there are numerous things that are available online for addressing cover letters, meaning that you're trying to focus, to match. You're in the process of matching the potential employer's requirements with yours. So you're trying to see if they match. I've written cover letters where I realize as I'm doing the cover letter that it's not a good match with this company, or it's not a good match with this potential employer. So you back off and you look for the next job that's out there. Anyway, this is the process. And lastly is the interview itself. If you get in the door, very important. Aspects of the financial legal aspects of employment. What this we're assessing the financial legal concerns related to employment, to obtaining employment. We'll start getting into a little bit of the weeds here, but you research the company before accepting an employment position, the work environment, making sure that it does match with. This is after the employer has offered you the position. This is when you really have to think hard about whether or not the position is right for you. Is the work environment one in which you like? The corporate culture, the company policies, procedures. Oftentimes you don't know until you actually get into the company, but these are all things to kind of keep in mind. Factors affecting salary. Again, it has to do with your own education, your training, the size of the company itself, and the salaries that are for comparable positions. I think there's a website, Glassdoor, many others that are out there, but the idea is that you want to there are two things here. You'd like to kind of get somewhere close to the middle. You don't want to be underpaid for obvious reasons, but you don't want to be overpaid. And what I mean by that is that when you're overpaid for a position, that's also a cautionary signal, if you will, because oftentimes what that means is if you're being paid greatly much higher than what the other folks doing that same job are being paid, something's up with that, meaning that the expectations are going to be perhaps too high from your employer, or there's something else that's going on. So these are things to be wary of. I'm not saying to turn down a job because they're going to offer you a higher salary, but just make sure you have your arms wrapped around why it is that they're offering you a higher salary. All right. Evaluating employee benefits, meeting employee needs, non-salary benefits. So this is aside from your paycheck, if you will. It could be child care, leave of absence, elder care, cafeteria style benefits. This encompasses your health care and so on and so forth. Allows workers to benefit credits that can be used to meet their needs. So you can use them for different things. You can use them for that child care. You can use them for elder care. You can use them for your health insurance. You can use them to buy more vacation. All these things are kind of out there. Flexible spending plans and medical spending accounts. And when you're young, you don't consider these things, but the older you get, the more important they become, especially if you have children, so on and so forth. You start to weigh a lot of these things. So tax equivalent employee benefits and employee benefits that are non-taxable have a higher financial value. So what that means is that if you're offered a life insurance policy, or if you're offered a medical insurance, this is all pre-tax, as in not part of your salary benefits. These are non-taxable benefits that you're getting from the company. That's very, very valuable to you. So you calculate the tax equivalent value of the non-taxable benefit, the value of the benefit. So let's say it's $1,000 of benefits that you're getting, and assuming it's your tax rate is 20%. As we're going through it down below, it's example, a life insurance policy with a non-taxable annual premium of $350 is comparable to receiving a taxable employee benefit worth $486. That's if you were to buy it on your own after taxes. If you're in the 28% tax bracket, the way it works is 350 divided by the 1 minus 0.28. That's a 28% tax bracket. That equates to $350 times 0.72, or divided by 0.72 rather, which gets us to $486. So these are all things that have to be considered. Taxes are a major part of planning. We'll be talking about this over and over again as we go forward. What your employment rights are. Employees have legal rights during the hiring process about age and so on and so forth. All these things that come into play. Pregnancy rights, no discrimination, selection process, minimum wage, overtime pay, workers' compensation, Social Security, unemployment insurance. All these things are part of packages, if you will. They kind of go without saying, if you will, as you're going forward. Long-term career development, what are the prospects? Analyzing techniques available for career growth and advancement. The career can be for a lifetime. Your parents and grandparents probably more so may have been in their same job with the same company for their entire career, or maybe not the same job, but perhaps with the same employer for their entire life. Those days are long gone, as your parents can probably attest to. A career can be for a lifetime. The career is beyond the actual employer. Of course, we're looking at the actual job. If you're an engineer for life, if you will, if you'd like. Skills and attitudes that can lead to fulfilling work-life experience, communicate well with others, be flexible and open to new ideas, develop efficient work habits. These are all basics that we carry forward regardless. Use lists, goal setting, note-taking, and time management techniques, anticipate problems and areas for actions, be creative and willing to assist others. In other words, back to those circular, the circular flow, if you will. Continuously go through these things, keeping track of things and keeping track of where you're at. Because what happens is that if you get yourself into a rut at work, oftentimes it has nothing to do with the job itself. And again, oftentimes has more to do with, you either becoming complacent or losing interest in the job. And the more you stay focused on developing and continuing to develop and redeveloping those skills and practicing those skills, the more likely you will be to be satisfied with that career going forward. Because there's always room for not just advancement, but for honing your skill set so far as the specific career is concerned. Training opportunities, again, for example, continuing to learn about new technology, diverse cultures, management strategies, global economy. We're bombarded by information all the time. What's important, what's not important, we have to make those decisions. And sometimes we have to sit down and force ourselves to be disciplined and to do these on our own. And there's also work. There are formal methods for expanding knowledge. Company programs, webinars, seminars, college courses, informal methods for expanding knowledge, reading, discussion with colleagues, online sources, meeting with employees from other companies. Social media is kind of I don't want to say it, but you can get caught up in things in social media, and it's an endless. Frankly, in many cases, it's a simply a waste of time. It's not to say you shouldn't be involved in social media. It's a state of, it's a reality in our lives. But limiting your social media and trying to focus on those things that are going to benefit you going forward. To get a better handle on these things that are being tossed around on social media, for example. Career paths and advancement. Mentor can be an experienced employee. Mentors are people that you either seek out or seek you out, but it's very important to find people that you can trust and that you can rely upon them to be able to go to for whatever that is, for emotional, moral support, for job expertise. Oftentimes it might be just a matter of touching base with people and saying, so how are you doing? And you tell them exactly how you're doing, whether it takes 2 minutes or 2 hours. You kind of open yourself up to mentors, because the mentor is the person that is going to help you move along in your career path. They're the ones that kind of get you back on track. And it may be formal, may be informal. If it's informal, you have to be careful, of course, and if it's formal, you have to be careful as well. But the takeaway is that mentors can be very helpful, and all of us have mentors. None of us do these things entirely, completely on our own. We need people that can help guide us, etc. Stages of career development. This is walking through, and this is something that you can take your time on your own more, but all things that we've talked about. The pre-entry career exploration stage, this is where you go out there and find a job to earn a paycheck, but you also are doing what? Well, you're earning a paycheck, so always remind yourself of that. You are being compensated, at least financially, for whatever you're doing. Whether or not it's not enough or too much, that's something for you to determine, and it goes back to opportunity cost, etc. But the real takeaway is that what you're doing is you're developing your skill sets, more so your technical skill sets for sure, but even more so those general skill sets that we had talked about before, where you develop discipline, etc. And then moving forward from that, establishing professional growth stage. This is you've acquired your degree, and you have your bachelor's, or you have your associate's degree, or you have your master's degree, whatever you could have. Or you could have started this with or without a degree, it doesn't matter. But the point is that you're actually jumping into your career of choice. And these are all cautionary things. I like the concern on the bottom, avoiding over-involvement in career burnout. Don't overextend yourself. And this is not to mean that you are a passive person and you stay away from ever jumping into opportunities, but you have to realize that you are limited as well. And I hate to say it, but bosses oftentimes, if you're willing to step up for something, they're willing to throw it at you. So keep that in mind, that if you take on too much, that could be detrimental to you. Okay, so you really have to be careful of that. So as we're moving along in that career path, and we may have changed jobs with companies, or we may have even changed careers themselves, but we're moving along through this, and through this career path, and we have to find ways of kind of balancing. This is always a balancing act, but work life, meaning you have a family maybe at this point. You have expenses associated with life. You bought a house, you bought a new car, so on and so forth, and you feel somewhat dragged down by your job at this point in time. You've got to find ways to rekindle that fire that you have for this job. And you see this again. I know you would see this with your parents, or perhaps grandparents, where they're in some sort of a mid-career adjustment phase. And these are all things that we have to do. We have to find things to seek out those challenges, continue to keep ourselves open to growth. And the late that career and pre-retirement stage, or as I call it, the RIP stage, the retired in place. I shouldn't say that, but this is where we start thinking about what life is going to be like after work, after your workplace. It may be as simple as saying, you know what, I'm done with this career and I'm going to move on to another career and continue working. Simple as that. So, what it is you're going to be doing with your spare time. Are you going to be doing volunteer work? What is it you're going to do to keep yourself occupied in the manner that is you're still working, in essence? You are still being productive in some manner, shape, or form through volunteer work, etc. Anyway, changing careers. This is at any point that we talked about before. Changing jobs may be more difficult than selecting the first job, because the problem with it is you have a skill set developed. You're an engineer. You have your skill set developed. You're thinking like an engineer, and you want to move into management, so you go out and get a business degree. to go along with it. And so suddenly you're changing hats to becoming more of a business person focused. You still have that engineer inside of you. So it's difficult to kind of retrain yourself. It's very difficult. Carefully assess the financial and personal cost, and because change is a costly endeavor, meaning opportunity cost in particular. Not just financial cost, but also cost in terms of developing your new skill sets and so on and so forth. Lastly, determine whether a career change will serve your needs and goals. Is that something that you really want to put yourself through? You really have to think about these things. Forced career changes. This happens in your parents, and maybe you've already been through this, where you have to develop a new skill set, or again, parents, grandparents, etc., where you're forced because of the term is called structural unemployment. So, example, you had a job working at a factory, and your job was you had a layoff or whatever from work, and you come back from the break after 6 weeks, and you find out that your job you've been replaced by a robot. Your workstation has been replaced with, it's become automated, so there's no longer any need of your service. You become structurally unemployed. So what do you have to do? You have to retrain yourself. And these are career choices. They're not career choices. You're not doing this by choice. You're being forced into this, but it's the same idea, is that you're changing careers. And that's extremely, extremely difficult. And it's difficult to deal with on many levels. Not just for yourself, but your entire family. Further on the career changes, improve your career skills through personal study and online courses, target job search to high growth industries. So try to ensure that you're not moving from the frying pan into the fire, is really what they're saying. Try to ensure to find some way to find a new career path that kind of suits your needs, and will serve you as you move along. Consider opportunities with nonprofit organization, temporary employment, back to learning, etc. Or that broad brush consulting, which means that you're taking piecework, you're doing something for a company that's going to last you X amount of time, kind of temporary employment. But you have to maintain that positive outlook and communicate confidence, or rather to maintain a positive outlook to communicate that confidence. You have to realize that this too shall pass, in other words. And so you have to kind of stay the course. And it's hard, very, very difficult. It's easier to talk about it, to say it, than to actually do it, of course. Again, pointing back to the Appendix 2, you can developing your resume. It's very straightforward, but these are steps that you have to walk through. And it's difficult, it's painful. This is where you say, I don't want to do this. But you do have to walk through and do these things. Just set up these resumes and have someone look at it. Hopefully it's somebody you can trust to tell you that, if you trust their opinion, okay, you've got to go through these things in doing your resume. So the different types of resume are, this is painful for me to look at these things too, because it means that I should be updating my resume. Chronological resumes, so you're going according to, you start at your most recent on top present education experiences, a reverse time sequence, meaning what you did first or last, what you're doing currently on top, and then going back in your history, your work history. Because if you're a human resources person, or if you're a potential manager or whatever, you're looking at this, you're focusing on the very top of the resume. Functional resume appropriate for diverse skills and time gaps and experience. So if you have, if you have skill sets that you may have 10 jobs over a period of 10 years, but this is where you focus on the job that's most important, that's most applicable to the job that you're actually applying for. You focus your efforts there, and then the others kind of waterfall down from there. Combination resume, chronological and functional, where you might have education separated from that chronological, and all these are very straightforward. Targeted resume, you should always target your resume to whatever your audience is out there. Video resume, social resume, involves LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social media networks. Oftentimes these are, the video resumes are interesting, especially today with this move towards the Zoom culture, if you will, because of the ongoing issues. Anyways, the point is that the video resumes are becoming quite prevalent, where you do a 10-minute blurb. Basically, you're networking. you're talking about yourself and going through your resume, if you will, for 10 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever the time frame you're allotted. Resume preparations, presented in a professional manner. Limit your resume to 1 page. This is not always the case. It may take 2 pages, depending upon how much information you have, or 3 pages, whatever. It all depends upon your audience that you're targeting, really. But yeah, it's in general, it's best to be concise, keep it short, and you're able to back up the different jobs with what you're able to flesh that out with your cover letter and also in the interview process itself. Use a format that highlights how your experiences will contribute to an organization's needs. This is, again, focusing your resume. So this is, you may have 1 resume, you may have 2, 10, 20, 30 resumes, depending upon which kind of employer you're looking at or which specific employment you're seeking. And a lot of this also has to do with the cover letter, but the resume is also often fine-tuned. Keep the format simple, keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. The reason you do that is because your potential employer is not just looking at your resume, but looking at possibly tens, dozens, hundreds of resumes at one time. And if your resume is 4 or 5 pages long, they're going to pass it by immediately, just because of the number of pages. So keep it as simple, concise, straightforward as you can. Using keywords, again, the buzzwords that would be associated with the industry. If you're looking for a job in accounting, try to think of accounting phrases that would be suitable. Or engineering, technical terms that may be appropriate specifically for a company that you're looking at. Use plain text or online resumes to avoid formatting problems. Most resumes are submitted online, true, whether they're PDF files or ultimately what many are going forward with is you have your resume and you plug in information into their online database, if you will. Use caution when using resume posting sites because you never know where they're going to go. Address emailed resumes to a specific person. And try to avoid sir, madam. Sometimes it happens that you don't have a choice where you're sending it to an organization you're not really sure who to send it to, but if there is a certain contact, try to send it directly to that person and address that person in the actual cover letter, and being very specific about that person. This is moving onward with the cover letter. Very straightforward introductory paragraph. You communicate kind of who you are. This is your quick blurb on who you are and what you could bring to the organization. The next group paragraphs is highlight specific qualifications for the job, and referencing your resume again for dates, details, etc. Elaborate on experiences and training. Something that fits that company which you're actually looking for employment with. The concluding paragraph is very straightforward. You ask thank them for the interview, etc., and you can keep that very, very short and just kind of restating your initial for your first paragraph. Anyway, the job interview itself, prepare for the interview by getting information about your prospective employer. This is where you have to do a little bit of work. It doesn't take a lot. Think about it this way. If you have someone coming over to talk to you, and think of you as yourself as the employer, wouldn't you like to be able to talk to somebody that is somewhat aware of your organization? What is it? What that you do? So that you're not the only person that's talking. So that person has something to offer, the person that you're potentially hiring. Think about it that way. think about you being on the other side of the table. You actually interviewing someone else. Yes, you don't expect them to know everything about your organization, but you do expect them to know a little bit about the organization, whether it's history, etc., what's kind of going on with the company. And as we go through the annual reports, a lot of detail out there online about companies. So just do a little bit of research at least. The more you do, the better off you are. So keep that in mind. Prepare questions to ask for your interests, the organization, policies, and benefits. They always ask questions because, again, the interviewer doesn't want to do all the talking, and they want to know how much you know about the organization, about the job itself. And some very specific things, including policies and benefits. You can ask how much you're going to get paid, but that's something that, frankly, that is not up front in the first interview. That's something that the prospective employer is going to mention. What are your salary requirements? Sometimes they ask you very straightforward, sometimes not. So be prepared for that. Practicing those interview skills. The interview itself is practice, so keep that in mind. This is not going to be most likely the first interview is not going to result in a job, or it may result in an offer, but you may not want that job. But always keep this in mind. And over your career, you will be going to dozens and dozens of interviews typically. So again, this is just a kind of a cheat sheet, the job interview questions. This is what they would be asking you. What education and training qualify you for this job? So they're asking very, very specific questions. Or I shouldn't say specific, but specific to this actual job, but they're general questions that are out there. So go through these lists and you figure out, like the personal qualities questions. What are your major strengths? These are things that they always ask. What are your major weaknesses, strengths, weaknesses? What do you plan to do for 3 or 5? What is your plan moving ahead? So on and so forth. These are questions that, whether or not you're specifically asked these questions, they will come up in the context of your interview in some manner. So keep this in mind. Thank you. Onward.